Welcome back to SatoshiConomy, Bitcoin and peer-to-peer financial empowerment. Hashtag love all, serve others. Why it's not too late. In this video, we're going to touch base on three general areas that having to do with FUD, secondly, having to do with the haters, and thirdly, just having to do with some of the important fundamentals about Bitcoin. Here's my Bitcoin plug for the video. Most recently, the most common form of fear, uncertainty, and doubt has to do around the conversation of mining and the electrical expense in creating Bitcoin. And I think it's very, very disingenuous in one respect because the energy expense that goes into mining or printing, storing, guarding, all of the expenses in the dollar denominated world is way more expensive, like 50x by a factor of 50. Secondly, the energy that is consumed by Bitcoin miners, as time goes on, it's more and more, they use more, it's green energy efficient, meaning because of the nature of energy and electricity, there's a lot of loss right at the point of its creation. And so Bitcoin miners, they go right towards the source to be able to use up, to intercept, and to capture that otherwise wasted energy. I read a 11-page report by Galaxy Digital that went into great depth about that. They estimate that at least about 8.25% is likely, as far as all of the energy that is wasted right at the source, that Bitcoin miners can use essentially as a green energy. Secondly, or thirdly, just the nature of Moore's law and the innovation of electrical components and switches means that it's very, very likely that the energy consumption rate for miners is going to be reducing as time goes on. There's also FUD in the sense that government's going to ban it. And the most common recently we had to do with China. And in there, the mainstream media, recently there was reports that surfaced in the mainstream media having to do with China banning Bitcoin, and it wasn't that at all. It was actually that they were resurfacing or reiterating the ban that they had put out years ago, reminding their own people, and the mainstream media put that out there as if it was going on, right now. So if you think about that and step back, you got to think, well, what's going on here? And that leads me right into the haters, talking about the haters. Now, we would all admit that Bitcoin or something that is going to be disintermediating is controversial. I mean, you look at Uber, how they disintermediated the taxi industry. Well, of course, the taxi drivers hated on it. They didn't want, they saw that they were going to be disintermediated, so they tried to stop it. Well, we would all agree that Bitcoin is controversial, but who are the people who don't want it to happen? It's mostly the bankers. And who is the largest owners of real estate in the world? It's the bankers. Most of the portfolios on the balance sheet have assets. In the asset column, it's like 40% has to do with real estate, or that's kind of, generally speaking, where many or most of the banks try to get to. But this, even in the Genesis block, in January 3rd of 2009, of the initial Bitcoin blockchain, it had a message in there having to do with the bailout of banks in England in a paper there. But it's going to disintermediate the banks, and so they are obviously the source of a lot of the negative or even the deceitful information that they tried to surface. So when we think of it just being a controversial, we've also got to think, well, this thing I want to put out there. So many people think it's too late, and that's what they want you to think. There is a large portion of the rich or the super wealthy or the elite who have this mindset that they want to keep as much of the wealth for themselves, and it's kind of an insidious natural thing about human nature, sad as it is, but true as it is when it has to do with money. It's just a natural fact that some people want to keep as many of those away from getting in on something that's early. So that is definitely something that is going on. And you and us and we've got to be aware of that. And the reason why I bring that up is we've got to look at way far below the surface level, easily retrievable information out there and dive a little deeper, because that's a large thing that's going on in the markets right now. I mean, Bitcoin was up to 65,000 almost. It dipped down to 28,000 on some exchanges, 54% or 55% drop. And the big reason for that has to do with the movement of large players. They can't manipulate it like they can in other historical markets, but there's still some of that going on. I want you to be aware of that. But the third area I want to touch on has to do with the fundamentals of Bitcoin, but mainly and primarily and fundamentally the issue of inflation. The economy that we're in, they are printing money like never before, not just in America. I mean, we hear about, so many people talk about the money printing that's going on, and Biden just put out a proposal for $6 trillion for 2022. Well, I guarantee you, it's, in my humble opinion, it's going to be 8 to 10 trillion. They're going to put that out and then see how much more they can tack onto it. And that is just blow away incredible, because the balance sheet right now is at, I think, 28 trillion. If you want to go look at debtclock.org, usdebtclock.org, I think is a really good site to look at. It has so much information on there just on the landing page. I think the balance sheet is at 28 trillion, and to think that in 12 months from now it'd be at 38 trillion potentially. That's 33% more money printed in 12 months. It's just, and it's not just America is what I'm saying. All of the banks, all of the nation state banks, practically all across the world are doing the same thing. So the inflation that we're talking about, I saw a report the other day that said that, now take this with a grain of salt, you believe so much of what you read initially. And that's a big point of what this video is all about. Said the year over year, as far as food, in some areas in America has gone up 40% year over year. And guess what? Food isn't part of the CPI index. So take that with a grain of salt. So inflation is something, and as far as markets and America, there's a lot of uncertainty. Well, Bitcoin stands right flat in the face of that. It is absolutely certain. There will never ever be more than 21 million Bitcoin ever mined. It has right now, until it gets to that, it is being mined in a reducing rate or a deflationary rate. It's under 1.8% or 1.9%. In about 3 years, it'll be reduced to under 1% as far as its inflation rate, the number of Bitcoin that are produced every day. So it is very certain. It's based on math. It's based on code. It can't be changed. It is the first truly scarce form of money ever in the history of mankind. It's also one thing that Bitcoin represents is, when we think of incredible inventions, well, one of the first ones was the ability for man to harness fire. What it did, it initially provided a fire source, a heat source, a light source, and also a cooking source, a military force, but it had to do with light, right? And light energy. Well, since the internet happened, the late 80s or whenever you want to say, I think Windows 95, that was, when the world took a quantum leap into its adoption. But what the internet represents is that they essentially harnessed the speed of light. So this is an incredible potentiality, incredible characteristic or property of Bitcoin. It enables people to conduct business via the speed of light. And because of that, it also with absolute certainty as far as the transactions and what's in there. So this speed of lightness characteristic greatly enhances the velocity of money. And this thing is so important, just the nature of that. What it means is money can circulate much more quickly. A barber, getting $20 for a haircut can go down and pay a bill on some of his supplies to the supplier next door. That an hour later, and that supplier can go buy a meal for his family at the grocer an hour later, and that grocer can turn around and make order for more supplies to make more money at his. I mean, the speed of it is so incredibly health enhancing for a particular or a regional economy. It just cannot be overstated. It's a great reason why it's not too late. And what I'm talking about is, people right now, because of its great ramp up, the parabolic rise in price, everybody's looking at it as a way to make profits. And yeah, I'm not against that, but the reasons behind it are more of the reasons. I mean, people who want to do that. I mean, if you want to sit in front of a pixelated screen and make some money, go ahead. But you'd make money at great risk also. And what I encourage people to do is look at it from a fundamental basis. The IRS has deemed it a form of property, and it is also, in that sense, a great wealth capture, and over time, which will enable people to sustain themselves. But with the Lightning Network coming aboard, what that is going to do is enable micropayments. So Bitcoin, in its birth, in the Satoshi white paper, it starts out Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. It was created and invented to be intended to be a cash system, an exchange system, but the market, the free market, is calling it and making it. It is becoming more primarily a store of value. And when it also becomes a much greater way to exchange money, oh my goodness, the demand for it will increase. So right there's a fundamental thing, one of the most fundamental important things about finances and economics is the law of supply and demand. With Bitcoin, the supply for it is decreasing, but the demand for it is increasing for many, many reasons. But everybody in the mainstream wants you to think, well, it's going to die, or your time has passed. Well, I'm looking at some or most of the Bitcoin that I've ever purchased, not selling it till next decade, or at least for 4 or 5 years. I'm sure I won't sell some of it till the next decade. So I'm looking at it for long term. And actually, because I'm looking 10 years down the road, I look to Bitcoin one day being $10 million. Not very many people have ever said it will be $10 million, but it will be $10 million one day. And when it does, at 21 million Bitcoin, at 10 million apiece, that means the market cap will be 210 trillion. And presently, most estimators put the real estate market in itself only at 200 trillion. And when Bitcoin subsumes gold and a lot of corporations, Treasury Reserve asset, and it subsumes much of the real estate market, not to mention the derivative market. The derivative market, it's so huge that we can't even really put a good estimation on it because there's so many layers of money and concoctions and money products on there. I mean, they're talking quadrillions, right? So it's not at all far-fetched to thinking long term, like 10 years, next decade, that it will be 10 million per Bitcoin. And it's not even far-fetched to think that might be possible within 5 years. Who knows? No one knows the future, but this is for sure. There's never been a more disruptive and greater innovation in money in the history of mankind. Look at Iran. It's a nation state. They're mining Bitcoin. They're allowing the mining of Bitcoin in that country so that, and they have this by rule, all the miners who mine the Bitcoin in that country, they have to give it to the treasury of the nation state of Iran. And also, well, the involvement of sovereign wealth funds. These are wealth funds or piles of money that are owned by nation states, countries. And these countries are beginning to buy, as part of their fund, Bitcoin. The bottom line is because profit or sound money will naturally flow like an ice cube melting water, becoming melting water. It'll flow to the most sound money. So it makes sense for you to consider to have some of it for yourself as part of your treasury, part of your balance sheet, part of your investment. This is not financial advice. You are the only one who's 100% responsible for your own financial choices. But the future, yeah, it's definitely, in my humble opinion, way not too late to get some Bitcoin. Some estimates that I think are the most reasonable are at about 200 to 250 million people are adoptees on the earth. So if it's 200 million out of 8 billion people, that's 2.5%. But I wouldn't count half the world, because half the world are babies or not adults. So if 200 million is divided by 4 billion people, that means that we're at about 5% adoption, roughly. Just an educated guess. It's way far not too late. Hashtag love all, serve others. Please like and subscribe. And please, one of the best ways you can help me is to share this with someone. Just send it off to someone so they can take a look at this. And then they can see the YouTube. I wish you well. I wish you wealth. I wish you health. And until next time, peace. Oops.